Hello, welcome to the show. Glad to be with you today. So, what do water crystals and God have to do with each other? And why am I talking about it? Well, actually, there's quite a lot that is revealed about God inside of water crystals. But also, it may change the way you think about creation, may change the way you think about yourself, may change the way you think about health and living. And it will definitely change the way that you think about your prayers and the way that you walk out your life. And actually, it might have something much greater to do with the apokatastases that Peter talks about in Acts, the restoration of all things. So let's get into that. How about we? So, I just want to share some pictures and some images of some of these water crystals and what we can learn from that. Every time I share this message and these talks about this, people always are really wide-eyed and surprised by what we can learn from this. But I think that's actually what we find right now, especially in science and quantum physics and all these things. We're having to relearn some things, but it is actually opening up the spiritual, it's opening up God, it's opening up our understandings of what our role is on this earth and what our role is in our relationship to creation itself. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about our relationship to creation. Whereas, were you just created to live your life and then die and go to heaven? Well, I don't think so. I think you were created to be the hands and feet, the actuation, the manifestation of heaven to this earth that creation is longing for. Romans 8, verse 19 says that all of creation stands waiting and longing for the unveiling of the sons and daughters of God. Creation, the cosmos, is actually looking for sons and daughters of God walking in their freedom to share in our liberty, it says. So it's actually looking to you to walk out your destiny, your calling, and your identity. What does that even mean? Is that, a lot of times we've just thought, well, that's spiritual language or whatever. Actually, it might be totally true. It might be what's actually happening right now. So for those who are just listening on the podcast, I'll try to describe to you the best way I can these pictures that we're going to see, but those who are watching, you can see these things. But the main evidence that I have and the main studies that we have is from Dr. Masaru Emoto. I can't fully pronounce his name very well, but anyways, Japanese scientist. And what's really fascinating, you've probably seen pictures. Maybe you have, maybe. I'm actually surprised by how many people haven't seen this. So, if this is your first time, great. But there's an awesome book that he has. It's called The Hidden Messages in Water. Hidden Messages in Water that he published. It's been around for a while, but like I said, people still have yet to always hear about it. But in this, he goes through a bit of a discovery that water is not always the same every single time. So let me describe a little bit of his journey, is that he got into studying some of this water, and he studies the water crystals. And what he does is he super freezes water really quickly. And you know how like a snowflake has a particular crystalline image. If you ever looked at a tiny snowflake as it fell on your hand or your glove or something, and they say that, none of them are the same. That might be true, might not. We don't really know. But they all have that crystalline, beautiful, 5 to 6 to 8 little points all sticking around in this beautiful star-like kind of looking image. That's what water does when you freeze it. And it took Dr. Emoto quite a while to finally get the right settings where he could get water to actually crystallize in that certain way. So it took a little bit. You can't just freeze this in your freezer and check it out. But anyways, so it's quite fascinating. What he did is he just wanted to see what kind of effects water had. So he started freezing water, and once he figured out how to do it and in the right settings, and he could actually then photograph those crystals. And what he found is that water is unique. And every single time water is frozen, and every single time it makes these crystals, it's different, they look different, and they carry different characteristics. And you might be thinking, okay, cool, whatever. Well, hang with me because it gets pretty crazy here in a little bit. The first thing, here's some pictures that I'm going to show you. For those listening, there's these beautiful, beautiful pictures. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little splines off this one of this beautiful star-like looking thing. But then he has Tawada Lake, which is also another beautiful 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as well, points on it. Just imagine the most beautiful crystalline structures you can. But then he actually went around and he started photographing, Antarctic ice and Fiji River, Mount Cook Glacier, which is a very fascinating, very octagonal looking one with these little splines off the ends. So much different than like the Fiji River, all these things. Quite fascinating stuff. This is the Shinano River upstream. So, okay, you might be thinking, well, that's very interesting. But here's what's interesting. Let me say interesting like 30 times. What's fascinating is that he started wondering, well, what if we could change those water crystals? Is water subjective to the environment that it's around? And so their first test was, well, let's play music, right? Music has frequencies. Music does all these things. What happens when we play music? So he started playing music to water. They would put a bottle of water, they'd play music to it, and then they would take that water and they would super freeze it and look at the crystals. And what they found was the water was changing to the music that was being played to it. Here's a picture of, they played the song Imagine. And it's so interesting the way it kind of spreads out there. Ave Maria, which is a beautiful, beautiful song. And you can kind of see it's got an octagon in the middle and then these beautiful crystalline structures off the sides. Amazing Grace. Canon in D. You see these? These are such interesting pictures. Here's Bach, aria on G. So you have these wonderful music is starting to change the way water is. Well, that's very interesting. So what else could you do with this? Well, then Dr. Emoto also then started, well, what if we showed pictures? Yes, pictures. What if we showed pictures to water? So they take a bottle of water and they'd say they take a picture and they'd put it underneath it and they'd set that bottle of water on top of it. Or they would take the picture, they'd print it off and they'd wrap it all the way around it and then they would take that water. Here's the first picture. So they show a picture here of a dolphin. But then this is what's interesting. Here's a picture of an elephant. And for those who are just listening, you can imagine a snowflake crystal, but in the middle, it pulls in and it creates these two lines, and it looks like a nose. It kind of carries the idea of an elephant. Crazy. Here's another picture that'll just convince you. They showed it a picture of heart. A heart. And for those, again, listening, it is the shape of a heart with crystals. Wow. Showed a picture of Niagara Falls. A picture of a cherry, which the flower looks kind of like a cherry blossom. There's a picture of a lotus. And then fireworks. And the fireworks, that kind of looks like a firework explosion. Wild. Wild, wild, wild. So what's happening? Now water is somehow copying the images that it's seeing? Yes, it actually is. So water is more than just H2O. It can actually change the molecule structures and remember things. What he's starting to find is that water has memory. That's what's so fascinating. And we'll get into some of the other scientists that also study this, that water has memory. It can store incredible amounts of memory in it. So then here's another thought. Well, he was like, well, what if we spoke to the water? So what he would do is he would have a bottle of water, a cup or whatever, and they would say, thank you to the water. Here's a picture of what thank you did. Another beautiful picture. But here's what's really interesting. What about when you say something negative to water? What does that do? So here's a picture of him saying, you fool, right? Angry, you fool. And it didn't create a beautiful crystal. It created just like this circular frozen ice thing. It wouldn't create a crystalline structure. He then said, well, what if I say, let's do it together? And it created another beautiful, beautiful, beautiful crystalline structure. But then what if he just says, do it, like I'm telling you what to do? And again, it wouldn't create a beautiful crystal structure. It created just this kind of ugly looking thing. All just by the words that he changed and the intention behind what he said. Then words like peace created such a beautiful, beautiful image. But then just the word war shows this really fractured looking crystal. Still kind of made crystal, but it was real fractured and broken up. One of the most beautiful crystals he has is when he said love and gratitude. When he said love and gratitude to this crystal, it made one of the most beautiful ones he has. Then I love you. But then here's another picture. You make me sick. I'll kill you. Wouldn't create a crystalline structure. Isn't that crazy? All because of the words that they said to it. That's amazing. So, what is happening here as well? They're saying things, and the water's changing. It's changing the structure of the water itself, all by their words, all by their intentions. We'll get into that just a second more, but then I want to show you something most amazing. Here's a picture of the, if I say this correctly, Fujiwara. Probably saying that wrong, but it's okay. Fujiwara before prayer, right? It's got no structure. It's got no crystal. He couldn't make it have a crystal. And then what they did is they prayed over the water. And in his book, he talks about they'll have Buddhist prayers and blessings. They'll have Christian prayers. They did all sorts of different spiritual groups. But they prayed over this water that couldn't create any crystals or structure. And then when they prayed over it, this is the picture that they got. And it's the most beautiful crystalline structure you've ever seen. There's just something just amazing about it, angelic practically. It's actually what's on the front of his book, is that crystal that was created from the prayer. They also took lake water, and 500 people prayed over the lake water, and it created this crystal. But here's something also amazing. Well, how far away from the water do you need to be? Well, this is where things get really wild. They took water from the lake as well, and people that were in Israel, why they chose that country, I don't know. They were just there, I guess, in Israel to Japan. Pretty far distance. I actually don't know the miles, but it's pretty far. They had people in Israel pray and bless the water there in Tokyo, and it created a beautiful crystalline structure after they prayed for it when they were thousands of miles apart. Isn't that crazy? That's wild. He goes on to show many different tests. He would do all sorts of studies where he would have children come in and he would say, I don't want you to say anything to this water. I just want you to think towards it. And so he would have them come in and they would think like love or joy or happiness or I love you, and it would create beautiful crystalline. He would say, now go in there and just think when you look at that water, I hate you. And it would change the structure of that water. Just their thoughts. Because you could make the argument, okay, well, our voice has certain frequencies, and when you speak, the frequency then restructures the water, and it does all this stuff. And you're like, yeah. And you could make this really natural. But then when you have kids coming in there, and you have them thinking either love or gratitude or joy towards something, and then thinking hatred and anger towards it, and it changes it, we're not just talking about frequency any longer. We're talking about spiritual realms, quantum understandings, consciousness. And that's where things get pretty wild. You could say maybe the same thing about people praying over lake water or something like that. Well, it's the frequency or something like that. But when you have them thousands of miles away and they bless that and it changes the structure of that water, now time and distance is not making the same difference. What's happening there? It's they're focusing their intention towards something and it's changing it. And then when they do it in a positive understanding, they release life. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. He did many different tests. You've maybe seen the rice test that is repeatable. It's where you take 3 cups of rice and you 3 cups of cooked rice, and you have 1 every day you say I hate you, 1 you ignore, and 1 you say I love you. And the test always shows up that the one that you say I love you like kind of actually makes a fermenting mixture to it, and it's actually good. The one that's ignored rots and is not good either, actually. And then the one that I say I hate you will turn like black and nasty, and it's a pretty vivid experience of the power of our words and our intentions towards something. He did those tests as well. And Dr. Emoto really is kind of a bit of a spiritual man himself, but he relates all of this and he says, man, our bodies are made of 70 to 80% of water. What happens to a child when you speak to it like this? What happens to the water in their body when this happens? What happens? What is this telling us? Is this weird woo-woo stuff? Well, I think it's showing us something that creation actually is paying attention to what we say, think, and feel all the time. That actually water has memory and it has structure. That's pretty amazing. That changes some things. That changes things about our health, the way our bodies are created, and the way that we live. So think about this. Just dive into this a second. Think about this with me for a moment. You have water just in a cup or a glass. And if you were to take that and freeze it in the way that Dr. Emoto did it, it may not create any crystalline structures, because the way he describes it is that it's dead water. It's dead. It has no life in it. There's no structuring to it. And what they have found, not just Dr. Emoto, is that water actually can be structured and unstructured, dead and alive. Jesus says that he is the living water. And now we're finding that water actually can be dead and water also can be living. That can be active and it can be restructured. You see, you may say, well, it's H2O. How can it be any more or less? It doesn't matter. Well, we're actually finding is that, yes, it can be H2O, but the way that those molecules can form in water, still just H2O, that they can create almost like a Morse code pattern, that they build these structures of its very cells, still being H2O, but building the structure of those cells. And it can be like a computer of a limitless memory bank, remembering everything that it comes in contact with, touches, experiences, everything. It can remember that. So water actually is keeping record of everything that happens around it, and it remembers it. we can get into some pretty crazy stories where there's, old kind of like mystical stories, but then you start thinking about them. Well, maybe there's a bit of a science behind it. There's an old story of a guy who was an orphan and didn't know where he was born, didn't know where he came from, and he went and visited this, I believe it was in Ireland, and went and visited this place and actually drank some of the water out of the river. And then like that night, he has all these dreams and these memories come back to him of, I was born in this area, and this is where my parents were from. And it's kind of a, mystical story. But then you start studying that memory can be stored in water and it remembers things. Maybe there was something behind that old story. We might call it an old wives' tale or just fantasy or whatever it is, but maybe they were understanding something long ago, that there's memory in water. Also, the water from around the world all carries different structures, different ideas. So maybe, people say, well, go explore the world, go experience things, go drink the water. You might actually expand the very understanding that your cells have by the water that you drink in different areas. It might explore you to new things. Weird, I know, but it's what the science is showing. So what does this have to do with God? What is this actually showing us? Well, it might actually, I think it's showing us a lot about what God created things to be. Romans 8, all of creation is longing, waiting, and growing for the unveiling of the sons and daughters of God. That means it's actually looking, listening, watching. It's remembering, and it's actually waiting to be recreated into the form that it was meant to have. If water can be dead, and one of you or me come along and we speak or even just think towards something of releasing life into the being of this water, it gets restructured. And then what if we drink that? What if it goes somewhere else into the world? What if it begins to create a chain reaction? All because a child who knew who they were in their identity released the revelation of love and gratitude even into the water source that came in contact with them. This is just one picture of what creation is showing us. It's just one revelation that this is actually the effect that we have on the world. And that's a greater point right there, is that there is an effect on the world that you have when you pray, think, feel, and speak. We understand in Christianity, it's the big thing to talk about right now that, well, it's kind of waning a little bit. But anyways, that there is life and death in the power of the tongue. And we're starting to come to understand, wow, my words have power. My words, I can speak reality and truth and all these things. And there is life and death in the power of the tongue. And when you start this study of these water crystals, you realize, yeah, I can speak love and gratitude to something and it actually changes the structure of that water. Or I can say things that are mean and hateful and it changes the structure of that water as well. And you can go, yeah, there's that scripture that there is power in the tongue. There's life and death in the power of the tongue. But that's just the top level. Because you could walk around and say, okay, I'm never going to say anything negative. I'm never going to say anything bad towards anything. I'm never going to be mean or whatever. But what we found is it's not just your words. It's the heart behind your words. It's the intention behind your words. What are you thinking towards people? What are you thinking towards creation? And what are you thinking towards yourself? What are you releasing? What if you say good words, but your heart is actually mean? In the South, when they say, well, bless your heart, that's not actually a compliment, right? We all kind of know that little thing. That's not really a compliment. So what we're saying is, well, yeah, I didn't say anything mean. Yeah, but the intention behind your heart, that wasn't right. That's what we're talking about here. That's what we're showing. And that there's actually something behind our words and that it can recreate things. Also, prayer is really, really powerful. Really powerful. So you may be thinking, man, do my prayers to have any effect? Absolutely. Do my prayers do anything? All the time. Every time you pray, there's going to be an effect. Have you ever had that thought that you're like, man, I pray and I pray and I pray. I don't really know if I'm making an effect. Well, these pictures in this study, you need to dive into this more if you don't understand, that every time you pray, something is happening. Water is being reformed. Creation is responding. It's listening to you. Every single time, that's happening when you pray. You have an effect. You have the power to change things in this world by your prayers, by your focused intention, by your love. Those things actually change the world around you. It's really important. It's really powerful. They were standing across the world and they prayed for water in Japan and it was changed. What does that mean? When you're not in a location and you pray, it can have an effect in that person's body, in that person's life, and in that person's atmosphere. When you pray, there is things going there. You don't even just have to be there. That's incredible. That's incredible to me. That gives me so much faith to believe that you're right. When I pray, something is happening for sure. It's even scientifically proven. Here's another crazy story that they would do. So they would take in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, there's a festival that they pray over the water and then people come and they drink it, right? And it's supposed to be health and healing. And, for a long time, people are like, oh, whatever, that's just spiritual woo-woo stuff. But what they found is they took that water and they tested it, and it was when they prayed over that water, there was beautiful crystalline structures to it. Well, take it a little bit further. They would take a little cup of that water that was beautiful, that had been prayed over, and they would go to a big barrel of water. Excuse me, I'm being texted right now. So they would take that water and they would pour it into a big old barrel of water that hadn't been prayed for and that wasn't structured in any way. And that little cup of water, of that prayed for water, when they poured it into it, it restructured all of the water in the whole barrel. One little bit changed the whole barrel. If that's not a picture of you in this world, I don't know what it is. When you encounter God and you get reformed, restructured, remade, you go out into the world and you actually are the sanctifying factor of this world. You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth, and it affects everything. When you get into government, when you get into teaching, when you get into health, when you get into your families, when you get into your churches, and you bring that little bit of who you are, that you've been remade into the image of Jesus, it will change the barrel that you're in. We will naturally receive information and life from the people that we are around. It's constantly remaking us. That's one picture of the power of prayer and everything that we do. Just that one little bit restructured the water. There's some other scientists. David Pollock talked about water memory, or David Pollock talked about the fourth phase of water. Another gentleman talked about water memory, and they actually proved that water has memory, and it's so amazing. They would take DNA from just a little bit of DNA, and they would dilute it down over and over and over and over and over. They would dilute it basically to the level, if you took one drop of blood and you put it in the ocean, that's how much they diluted it, right? So there should be no traceable amount of DNA, and yet they could still find that even though it wasn't in the water anymore because they had diluted it so much, it still had memory of the code of the DNA, that they could recreate the DNA from the information that they were finding in the water. That's insane. But it was actually, the proof was that water could remember complex codes of even DNA structures. Water remembers things. It remembers what it touches. It remembers who it comes in contact with. It remembers everything. David Pollock, he talks about the fourth phase of water. We generally know 3 phases of water, but he actually discovered that there's a 4th phase of water, and it's where it's like a crystalline gelatin-like structure. It's actually that it's not liquid, it's actually solid, but it is a fourth phase of water. Your cells are made up of the fourth phase of water. And it's pretty amazing. You really should study the fourth phase of water because it gets into how we actually hydrate in our bodies, what it actually takes, and even the electrical abilities that your body carries when you have the fourth phase of water. So all of this comes about in water. We don't actually fully understand water. We're coming to understand some things, but we don't fully understand water. But think about it. And let me go off a little tangent. I'll come back to the spiritual aspect of this. But water remembers everything it touches. Even if there's nothing getting leached into that water, it remembers what it touches. If DNA can be so watered down that DNA was remembered as if one drop of blood in the whole ocean, if it can be remembered, then when water touches, whether it touches rocks or plastic, or it comes into contact with harmful chemicals and heavy metals, if it remembers that water, when you drink that water, it's transferring that memory to you. Whoa. Crazy. Not good. Not good. And so honestly, Dr. Emoto talks about in his book that he went around the world studying water, and most of the water that comes out of your tap will not even create a crystalline structure. It's dead water. Water doesn't like to go through pipes with 90-degree turns and all that stuff because it actually kills the water. Think about the water, how it's constantly just recycled in big cities, and they just take the wastewater, recycle it, and shoot it back to you. What memory are you getting from that? It's pretty, not only is there things in that water that they can't separate out, but what memory is it having? That's why water coming out of a stream or a fountain or something that's flowing actually will have a better structure. So this has a lot to do also just with our health. What water are we drinking? Is it actually good structured water? What kind of things do we want to have? And maybe we should pay attention to what we're putting in our bodies. On a health level, this is important for us to understand. And there are things you can do. You can filter it well, then you can restructure it. What if you prayed over your water before you drank it? What if you showed pictures of good things, of hope and of love? Also, you can restructure it by flowing it and exposing it to light, all those things. I know you're like, why is this guy talking about it? Well, I care about your health, and maybe this actually matters of what we put into our bodies, right? Because we're water beings, we're light beings, we're energy-based, all this stuff. It matters what we're putting into us. We're the temple, and so we should think about these things. So water, it's pretty amazing. But let's go back to the spiritual a little bit. What we have, let me say it like this. In our world today, we're predominantly Newtonian-like thinking people, right? Newton came up with the laws of physics and thermodynamics and all these things. But in his mind, everything was absolute, and then there's an atom and all these things make up the structures of the world and everything's just absolute. His idea was that, yes, God created the universe. He did believe that there was a divine being. But he says, well, God created it and he wound up the universe and all the things in it like a clock and set it going and left us. And now it's just winding down. And it's basically that everything is absolute, matter is all that there is, and so that's where we're at. And now we're in the modern age or postmodernity that we're into the place that, if there's nothing, then where does God come from? And then we have, then we had the people who come and started criticizing all this stuff, and now we're, in secular society, and it doesn't work, but here we are. But think about this. What this is showing us is that we've been wrong, and Newton didn't fully understand it. Quantum physics is also starting to teach us this, that Newton didn't fully understand everything. There was a deeper level. Because the conversation has been for a long time, okay, if all that is material is all that there is, if all that is that's here, where does consciousness come from? How do we have consciousness in this world of absolute things? And so the journey and the looking and all this stuff was, well, maybe it's not real, and where does it come from, and where does the consciousness come from? But we're actually totally backwards on everything, because we've been looking for consciousness in a material world. But what we're finding is that our consciousness shapes the material world that we're in. And so why we are backwards is consciousness does not come out of the material. The material is coming out of consciousness. John 1 tells us that all things were created by and through Jesus, and nothing can exist apart from him. That means everything is being maintained, created, and sustained by Jesus himself, and it is the very consciousness of Jesus that creates the world that we live in. We are living inside of Jesus' consciousness right now. And our consciousness inside of him is what can affect and change, because we're created in his image, the material, whatever that even means anymore, world that we live in. So we had it totally backwards. We were trying to find God from the other way around. And what we find is, if you can pray from thousands of miles away and water gets restructured, then that means the consciousness of a person, the focused intention of that person through prayer, through love inside of the person of Jesus, actually recreates the very structure of the world that we live in today. That means when you pray for somebody, even if you are not physically there, there is going to be a change and something shift inside their body, even if it's just the water inside their body getting new information and new understanding and new DNA. But in a spiritual sense, what is happening is we are not in a material world being affected by spiritual things. We are spiritual people affecting a material world. And when you partner with the spiritual intention that you have on a quantum level across space, time, all of these things, you have an effect on this world because it is subject to consciousness, not consciousness subject to the material world. And that's what Jesus always was trying to tell us. Jesus was trying to get us to see the kingdom. He was trying to get us to see the reality that if you ask anything in my name, it will be done for you. Abide in me and I abide in you, and all these things that you ask will be given to you. Abide in who? Abide in the personness of the consciousness that everything lives and has its breath. And if you abide in him, anything you ask in that very consciousness and world can be given to you. Anything is possible because all things are held in the suspension of the possibility that could be through Jesus. And you're abiding in him. He is the door to a supernatural quantum world. Whoa, Anthony, what on earth are you talking about? Let me reel myself in just a little bit. Water has memory. Water is formed by the words that we say, by the music that we play, and even the thoughts that we have towards it. The prayers that you pray are incredibly powerful because of the power that lives behind you. So just know this today, that when you pray, something is happening. When you think it's something, the world is changing around you. You are creating the world that you live in by the thoughts that you have. That's why Jesus says, take every thought captive. But most importantly, I think this. Romans 8 tells us that all creation longs, waits, and is groaning for the unveiling of the sons and daughters of God to be revealed, to live and to walk in our liberty. The water in this world is waiting for a son and daughter of God to say, it's time for you to be structured to love. It's time for you to walk in gratitude. You create a new creation everywhere you go. Creation is longing, waiting for you. Peter tells us in Acts that he, Jesus, must remain in heaven till the apokatastasis, which means restoration or healing of all things. What if Jesus is not waiting for things to get really, really, really bad, but what if Jesus is waiting for things to get healed and then he'll come back to crown it off? What if Jesus is saying that you are more than conquerors means that we will be conquerors and restorers of creation itself? What if the dominion that we lost in creation is found inside the door of Jesus, the quantum life that he carries, and that we release it and bring creation back to the garden experience? What if creation is not waiting for us to let things get really bad and then Jesus comes saves us? What if creation is waiting for you and I to start living in the freedom that Jesus paid for on the cross, and then we get to release it to them? If you're stuck in fear, if you're stuck in anxiety, if you're stuck in depression, that's what you're going to release into this world. And all creation is going to get is fear, anxiety, hatred, and anger, and it's going to remember those things. But if you start walking in what Jesus paid for, which is life and life more abundantly, everywhere you go, you can release life and life more abundantly, even into the very water of creation itself, and they can be reformed. Think about it. Everything is made of water. Trees, grass, plants, even rocks. There's water inside of those things. On a deep, deep level, when the trees see you coming, you can speak to that tree and release life to it, into the water that's in that tree. The grass, the flowers, animals, everything is made up of water. And actually our health comes from good water structure inside our bodies. So when you pray over an animal, when you pray over a tree, when you pray over a person, I know you're like, Anthony, you're too weird for me right now. But what if it's not just about humans finding Jesus? What if it's about creation walking in the freedom that you have? This is not just about you dying and going to heaven. This is about you realizing that you were made to live free and alive in Jesus. And then when you go into the world, you can give it away. You can give it to everything. You were created to be world changers. And so when you pray for somebody in the hospital and they're far, far away, know that you're making a difference. And when you lay hands on somebody and you pray for them right there, you can change their body in that very moment, because you're changing the water structure. You're changing everything. You're recreating a new life. You're releasing love and joy into them. When I pray for people, don't say, oh, I curse this thing inside their body. No. Love is the most powerful frequency in the world. Love is the most powerful restructuring agent in creation. So if you want to release healing to somebody, release love into their body. Their immune system will thank you. Their water will thank you. Their mitochondria will thank you. Their stem cells will thank you. Everything will thank you. We can see healing because it's inside of this understanding. This is the dream, man. This is the dream, to see creation come alive with us. So your life is not just about serving God well. Your life is about walking in the joy of the Lord. You were created to glorify, right? What does the Westminster Catechism say? You're created to glorify God and enjoy Him forevermore. And in the enjoying God forevermore, creation becomes made new through you. So have faith in your prayers, but also look at the world around you and realize you are the agent of new life, and it's waiting for you to understand who you are. That's what this is all about. So I will shut my mouth, but go read the book, go study it, go on his website, and let God show you that you really do make a difference in this world, and creation's longing for it. Thank you once again.